The Singaporean economic model was astonishingly successful. It transformed the entire island nation from a third world country to a first in just one generation. People, leaders, and heads of state applauded it for making it one of the world's most miraculous economic events. The reason behind all of its economic growth was because of one factor: its government. The People's Action Party, or PAP for short, was always regarded as the country's single largest contributor to its underlying success. From Kuan Yew to Lee Hsien Loong, Singapore has always seen this single-party rule in the entire country, and was always attributed to its success of it. However, the PAP's role in all of these is relatively true, and its economic model is one of the grandest schemes for the island nation's success. The question is, should other countries copy it? Or rather, what would happen if, say, its neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia, the Philippines, or Vietnam, follow the same economic model that PAP has implemented over the years? It has stayed in power. Well, to understand whether or not the Singaporean economic model is a strategy to be followed, let us first see what the PAP did, and how the economic model works. The PAP political party was founded way back in 1954 by a group of highly intelligent people. One of them was famously known as Kuan Yew. The man is often denoted as the cause of all of its economic miracles, and a man who is known and chased after by world leaders in order to understand how he did it. However, while Kuan Yew's exceptionalism is true, we're still missing one big factor. The real success of a PAP-led Singapore is not just because of Kuan Yew's sole intellect. Rather, it was his ability to pick the right team. Simply, Singapore became successful because it was governed by the right people, and Kuan Yew was excellent at choosing who those right people are. You see, these factors are often forgotten. We often only know about Singapore's success because of Kuan Yew, but we forget about his friends who helped him along the way. For a country to be successful, after all, it does not need one excellent leader, but rather it needs an excellent government. The same concept could be applied to a company, and as this is easier to understand, a company cannot succeed with just one great leader. He would need a lot of managers and employees who are likewise exceptional at what they're doing. If Kuan Yew did not have the right people by his side, it would be disastrous to think about what Singapore would be like today. Hence, we procure the reason why it's all about PAP, and not just Kuan Yew. On the other hand, the single crucial detail of what the People's Action Party had done right was just one thing during its lifetime. It had cleansed corruption. Corruption has always been the sole reason, if not one of the reasons, why economic growth is being pushed back. However, the Action Party fixed any instability within its rankings. How they did this was very easy to understand, and we can conclude with one word: salary. You see, the Prime Minister of Singapore today is entitled to a salary of more than $1.5 million a year. Compare that to the salary of the United States, which is a quote-unquote the largest country in the world. The president of that nation only makes $400,000 a year. Furthermore, no other country globally makes more than the Prime Minister. The second largest in the list is Hong Kong, which has an economic model almost similar to that of Singapore. Yet its head of state only made around $600,000. Likewise, having a highly paid government official means that the chances of them embezzling some funds would be very low. Had the former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak been paid a lot more than a salary of about $60,000 annually, and any other country with political instability had paid their government a lot more, would scandals like these still be true? Well, of course the answer would be yes, but on the scale of how much will actually happen, it should be far lower than where it is. While there are no proper calculations on the impacts of pay grade and corruption, many studies still support and conclude on this basis. A politician that gets paid more is often less corrupt in nature. The government as part of the entire economic model is, in simpler terms, one big part of Singapore's success. They had fixed corruption. That's all there is to it. Because of this, they were favored by their citizens, and they won successful general elections every time. While it might also be true that there will be political cases here and there, the rate at which it happens is very low. Let us, however, then move to the agenda set in place by the PAP. The PAP made two factors that they always followed. The first is economic intervention. The government has always intervened in everything about Singapore's economy. For example, their public housing model had extremely worked. Nearly 80% of Singaporeans live in publicly subsidized housing. In simple terms, the government is intervening in the housing market by providing cheap options for Singaporeans. The second factor that PAP has always implemented is free market policies. According to the Economic Freedom Index, Singapore currently ranks first. This index, which is published by the Heritage Foundation and Wall Street Journal, measures 4 major policies: rule of law, government size, regulatory efficiency, and market openness. These 4 factors are very much embedded across Singapore's economic model. The rule of law is very much respected, whether on intellectual property rights, physical property rights, and most importantly, the public trust in the politicians. The rule of law is sought after the most by international companies. Would a businessman even invest in a country if there was no respect for their innovation? And so on. The second of which is government size, meaning tax burden and government spending, and a few other factors. The tax burden does not need to be explained in detail. Taxes in Singapore are very, very low. Government spending, on the other hand, is very efficient. The government has always prioritized welfare programs, education, and all other necessary fixes. Regulatory efficiency, on the other hand, is easily seen across the island nation. The difficulty of starting a business to getting it up and running is extremely easy. Furthermore, regulations in Singapore are even known to be some of the best in the entire world. Lastly, market openness is probably the most crucial out of all of the other 4 major policies. Market openness is sufficiently well established by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS for short. The MAS has always placed proper and strict rules that all of the financial institutions in the country follow. Without MAS and an adept rule, it is more likely that the financial system would not be to some extent successful. Now, of course, these are just some of the very high-level aspects of how their government ran the country. There is likewise a lot more and a longer story behind their success. However, this leaves us with the final question: should other countries follow it? Well, if we try to apply the same concepts to other countries, we may likely experience some challenges. First, not every country can afford to pay its government properly. The Philippines and Indonesia, for example, do not have a sufficient budget to administer their country, unlike Singapore. We may even be challenged by the fact that we would lose more government money if we paid them more, rather than losing it on embezzlement. Second, subsidized housing does not always work, or rather, government intervention in the entirety cannot easily be applied the same way as one country does it. The whole process of a subsidized house takes on a more difficult narrative than how Singapore did it. Singapore could have only done it easily because it had a small population and a high per capita. For the Philippines and Indonesia to implement, it would rather be expensive, and the social cost relative to the benefit could be a lot more compared to Singapore. Furthermore, there's even a lack of housing in their own respective countries. For instance, the Philippines has a housing shortage of more than 6 million. Finally, being economically free is also difficult to implement in one's country. Each country has its own challenges and barriers. Singapore was just in the right geographical timeline, where they had a small country that could be governed, just like how a corporation is run. For Indonesia to explore a more market-free country and fewer regulations, it may need to have to fix its corruption issues first, and also fix its inequality. Only then will Indonesia be able to focus fully on enabling more market efficiency. In the most simplistic explanation, other countries can follow the same path that Singapore did. However, the challenges of Singapore would not be the same challenges that other countries will face. The larger the country, the larger its population, and the more complex situations it has to deal with. Furthermore, culture also plays a big role in the entire agenda. Singapore's exceptionalism was because it had every bit of advantage when it came to fixing problems. It came out of a distraught economy in the beginning, and with a team of motivated and highly intellectual people who wanted to make Singapore better, it had only one path to go to: success. However, that does not mean that Singapore had zero problems. They did, but would probably not be at the same level as other countries. Every country, government, culture, and people are, after all, very distinct from one another. But anyways, these are just one side of the story. As we noted earlier, we can't discuss every bit of detail on how Singapore actually succeeded, and how other countries may follow. Do let us know, however, what you think. Thanks for watching.